The dust rose like breath from the earth, swirling around Evelyn Marlowe's boots as she stepped off the stagecoach in Copper Creek, Wyoming Territory. The afternoon sun beat down hard on the crooked row of wooden storefronts. Her single carpet bag was small enough to carry in one hand, yet it held every piece of her life that hadn't been lost to fever and debt. She lifted her chin against the heat, against the eyes already watching the widow in black step onto their street. A sign creaked above the general store door. Somewhere down the street, a hammer struck metal in steady rhythm, the town's rough heartbeat keeping time with her own. Evelyn took a deep breath of dust, horses, and hot pine. It smelled like beginning, but she had learned that every new beginning came with a price. She unfolded the newspaper clipping again, its corners worn soft from travel. Cook needed at Barrett Ranch. Fair wages, must be capable and respectable. Respectable. She almost laughed at that word. Respectable had buried her husband and left her near starving. Still, she pressed forward, skirts brushing grit, ignoring the whispers that followed like wind through dry grass. "That's her?" one voice murmured. "The Kansas widow." Another snorted. "No family, no man. Reckon she'll find both before week's out." Evelyn's fingers tightened on her bag strap, but she kept walking. Dignity, she reminded herself, was armor. The bell above Coleman's general store jingled as she stepped inside. Cool shade, barrels of flour, and the faint tang of leather filled the air. Behind the counter, Mr. Coleman looked up from his ledger. "I'm here about the cooking position at the Barrett Ranch," she said. Before he could answer, rough laughter broke from the corner. 3 cowhands lounged there, all dust and swagger. The tallest, scar over his eyebrow and whiskey on his breath, grinned. "Well now, boys, looks like old Barrett's found himself a new recipe for the supper table." The others snickered. Evelyn's voice stayed even. "I'm looking for honest work, sir, nothing else." "Honest?" the scarred one drawled, stepping closer. "Out there alone with 20 men, cooking more than beans, I wager." "That's enough, Thornton." The new voice cut clean through the room. The doorway framed a tall man in a sun-faded coat, light spilling around him like judgment. Jonas Barrett. His eyes, gray as weathered steel, found the heckler first, then turned toward Evelyn. He didn't have to raise his voice again. Silence settled by itself. "Do you men have work?" he asked quietly, "or just bad manners?" The cowboys shuffled. Thornton spat, muttered something, and pushed past him into the street. The rest followed. Jonas's gaze softened as he tipped his hat toward her. "Ma'am, sorry you had to see that." "I can handle myself, Mr. Barrett," she replied, matching his look. "But thank you." He studied her for a beat, sun lines around his eyes, jaw set from too many years of doing things alone. "You're here for the cook's job?" "Yes, Evelyn Marlowe." He took her hand, rough palm warm around hers. "Can you feed 20 hungry men who think salt solves every problem?" Quote, "I ran a boarding house kitchen 3 years. Made tougher meat than they'll ever chew tender again." He smiled faintly. "Then you'll do. Ranch is 15 miles north. Work starts at dawn, ends after dark. $30 a month and your own room off the kitchen. You'll be the only woman there. When do we leave? Hour or less, unless you need time to think. I've done enough thinking. I'll be ready." As she turned to go, the town's gossiping matrons whispered near the calico bolts. "No good will come of this," one hissed. A widow living among cowhands. Scandalous. Evelyn didn't pause. Some words were just wind. She had outlasted worse storms. An hour later, she sat beside Jonas on the wagon seat as the team started north. The road stretched long and red into the fading light. The town shrank behind them, its noise swallowed by open land. "Doesn't bother you what they said?" he asked after a while. "Mr. Barrett," she said softly, watching the horizon turn gold. "I've been talked about since the day I buried my husband. Talk can't touch what's already survived the fire." He gave a low chuckle. "You've got grit, Mrs. Marlowe. The ranch will need that." She smiled faintly, eyes fixed on the far line of hills. "So do I." The wagon creaked forward into dusk. the air cooled, smelling of sage and promise. Somewhere out there waited hard work, hungry men, and a man whose silence carried stories she wasn't ready to hear, but one day would. For now, the sound of hooves on dry earth was enough, steady as a heartbeat, leading her toward whatever waited beyond the ridge. The Barrett Ranch came into view just as twilight deepened over the valley. From the last rise, Evelyn saw a cluster of buildings nestled among cottonwoods, the main house sturdy and plain, the bunkhouse and corral stretching toward the open range. A lantern burned on the porch, its glow cutting through the purple dusk like a welcome or a warning. "Welcome to the Double B, Mrs. Marlowe," Jonas said, reining in the team. She could hear the weariness in his voice, but also something like pride. He'd built this place with his own hands. The way his gaze lingered on it told her that much. The wagon rolled into the yard. A few ranch hands stepped out of the bunkhouse, wiping their hands, curiosity written all over their sunburned faces. Jonas climbed down first, then offered her his hand. His touch was steady, not lingering, but she felt the quiet strength behind it. "Boys," Jonas called, "this is Mrs. Marlowe, our new cook. You'll treat her with the same respect you'd give your own mother, or you'll find other work. Clear?" A chorus of "yes, sir" followed. Someone even doffed his hat. An older man stepped forward, lean and silver-haired, his kind blue eyes wrinkling at the corners. "Name's Cal Whitaker, ma'am. Foreman here. Lord, are we glad to see you. Been eating things that could make a buzzard cry." Evelyn smiled. "I'll see what I can do to mend your suffering, Mr. Whitaker." Jonas led her through the kitchen door of the big house. Inside smelled of dust, grease, and stale coffee. The stove was big as a carriage and twice as grimy. Her new quarters sat just off the kitchen, a small, clean room with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window looking west toward the mountains. The simple lock on the door felt like peace. "You'll find water in the well out back," Jonas said, setting her carpetbag inside. "Breakfast at 5, dinner at noon, supper when the sun hits the ridge. It's hard living out here. No one will fault you if you decide it's too rough." Evelyn straightened. "I've known worse, Mr. Barrett. I'm staying." Something flickered behind his eyes. Approval, maybe respect. "Then welcome to the Double B." When he left, she sat for a long moment in the quiet, listening to the boards creak and the wind sigh through the eaves. Then she rolled up her sleeves. The stove, the floor, the dishes. It all needed work. By midnight, everything shone, and she'd made her first batch of dough ready for morning biscuits. She slept little, waking before 4. The pre-dawn air bit cold as she hauled water, but she liked it. The feel of her own breath in the dark, the spark of life returning to a place left half dead by neglect. By the time the horizon glowed pink, the kitchen smelled of frying bacon and strong coffee. She set out plates of biscuits, eggs, and beans as the men filed in one by one, hats in hand, faces cautious but hopeful. "Sit," she said simply. "Eat while it's hot." They did, and soon the room filled with the low hum of approval. Cal took a bite, closed his eyes, and declared, "Boys, we're saved." Laughter broke out, warm and easy. Jonas appeared last, still buttoning his shirt. He stopped just inside the doorway, taking in the clean kitchen, the full table, the smell of real food. "Seems you've improved morale," he said. "Empty stomachs are poor company," she replied, pouring him coffee. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. Both had known hunger of a different kind. Days fell into rhythm. Dawn to dark, the work never ended. She cooked for 20 men, baked bread, washed, mended, and managed supplies. When she wasn't cooking, she was cleaning. But it was honest work, and each sunset left her more certain she'd chosen right. The men treated her with care. Flowers sometimes appeared on the step, anonymous but sincere. Young Eli Morgan, barely 19, blushed every time she spoke his name. She pretended not to notice. Jonas kept his distance. Always polite, always formal. Yet she caught him watching sometimes, from the barn door, from the porch, his eyes soft, thoughtful. At first, she ignored it. But slowly, she stopped pretending it didn't stir something in her too. 2 weeks after her arrival, shouting outside broke the calm. Evelyn rushed out just as a horse reared in the corral, kicking wild. A young hand, Eli, lay sprawled in the dirt. The horse snorted, eyes rolling, ready to trample him. "Stay back!" Cal shouted. But Evelyn was already moving. She grabbed a bucket of oats, shaking it until the rattle drew the Mustang's gaze. "That's it," she whispered. "Easy, boy. You're scared, that's all." Step by step, she edged closer, voice steady, movements calm. When the horse's breathing slowed, she slipped the rope over its neck and passed it to Cal. Then she dropped to her knees beside Eli. "Fetch water," she ordered, examining the boy's head wound. Jonas came running from the barn, eyes sharp with fear. "How bad?" Quote, "He'll live, just needs stitching." "You can sew?" "Better than your last cook, I'd wager," she said, threading a needle with steady hands. When she finished, Eli blinked awake, dazed but smiling faintly. "Did I break him, ma'am?" "Only your pride," she said, relief softening her voice. Later, after Eli was settled in the bunkhouse, Jonas found her scrubbing blood from her sleeves at the well. "That was brave," he said quietly. "Or foolish. Maybe both. Would you rather I'd stood by?" He shook his head. "No, you saved the boy." Their eyes met again, and this time neither looked away. "Mrs. Marlowe," he said finally, "you keep surprising me. And you keep calling me Mrs. Marlowe, as if that armor protects you." He smiled, just a little. "Maybe it does." That night, the men's laughter carried through the dark. Eli would be fine. The ranch was calm again. But in the quiet kitchen, Evelyn found herself staring at the lamplight flickering against the window, thinking of Jonas Barrett and the way he'd looked at her. Not like a widow, not like a cook, but like a woman who just reminded him what courage looked like. The following days brought wind, dust, and an uneasy stillness that stretched over the ranch like a taut rope. Evelyn felt it in the air, in Jonas's quiet eyes, in the restless talk among the men. Something was coming. She just didn't know what. It arrived on a clear morning when she was kneading bread. Raised voices echoed from the yard. She peered through the window and saw Jonas facing a well-dressed man with 2 armed riders flanking him. Their clothes were too fine for cowhands, their posture too proud for hired men. Jonas's shoulders were stiff as iron. Evelyn wiped her hands and stepped closer to the open door. "Now, you can't run this ranch on borrowed dreams, Barrett," the stranger said smoothly. "The bank's patience won't last forever." "You'll get your payment when I sell my herd, Morrison," Jonas replied. "Same as every year." Evelyn's pulse jumped. So this was the man behind the whispers, the owner of the neighboring Broken Spur Ranch, and by the look of him, a man who'd never worked a day in his life. Morrison smiled thinly. "Cattle prices are falling. What if your herd doesn't bring enough? Sell me the water rights to Canyon Creek. I'll see the bank extends your loan." Jonas's jaw tightened. "That creek feeds half my grazing land. Without it, the Double B dies." "Better half alive than all dead," Morrison said with a shrug. "Think about it, Barrett. My offer won't last." He rode off with his men, leaving a cloud of dust and tension behind. Jonas stood for a long time, watching them disappear. Evelyn poured coffee and brought it out quietly, setting it beside him on the porch rail. He didn't look at her, just said, "I suppose you heard." "The windows are thin," she answered gently. He nodded once. "Morrison's been after my water for years. He knows I'm stretched thin." Quote, she studied him. Broad shoulders, sun-faded coat, the weary strength of a man fighting a battle he couldn't afford to lose. "You'll make payroll," she said simply. He looked at her, and for the first time something close to a smile touched his mouth. "If the herd holds its weight, maybe. If not—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. That evening, Evelyn cooked as if to fight despair with flavor. Roast beef browned just right, fresh bread, molasses cake that made grown men hum with pleasure. Jonas said little, but when she caught his gaze across the table, Gratitude warmed his eyes more deeply than any words. Later, sleepless, she stepped onto the porch. The stars hung close and bright, the air still except for the distant yip of coyotes. She didn't hear Jonas until he spoke behind her. "Can't sleep?" She turned, startled, hand to her chest. "You move too quietly, Mr. Barrett." "Habit from the war," he said, settling against a post beside her. "Some nights I stand here and think." "About what?" "The past, the future, whether I'm holding on to something already gone." Quote. He paused, voice low. "My wife used to love this view. Said the stars were proof God still remembered us. Lost her and our daughter to fever 6 years ago." Evelyn's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I buried my heart with them and poured what was left into this land. Some nights I wonder if that makes me faithful or just a fool." She looked out at the darkness. "My husband used to say land keeps memories better than people. Maybe you're not chasing ghosts, Mr. Barrett. Maybe you're just keeping faith." He turned to her, eyes catching the silver of the moonlight. Cookie never said things like that. "Well," she said, pulling her shawl tighter, "I'm not Cookie, and I don't scare easy." A slow, genuine smile curved his mouth. "No," he said quietly, "I don't believe you do." They stood side by side, two souls shaped by loss, finding in silence what words could never carry. When she finally said goodnight, he didn't stop her. But long after she closed her door, she could still feel his presence lingering in the hush of the night. 3 weeks passed before the next storm, this one made of dust, hooves, and panic. Evelyn was hanging laundry when she heard shouting near the corral. The world seemed to tilt. A young rider, Eli again, was down, the Mustang he'd been breaking still kicking wild in terror. "Get back!" Cal shouted, but Evelyn didn't hesitate. She grabbed the feed bucket, voice calm and steady, coaxing the horse away from the boy. When she finally got close enough, she took hold of the rope and handed it off to Cal. Then she knelt by Eli, fingers finding the pulse in his throat. "He's breathing," she said, her voice all business now. "We'll need to stitch that cut. Billy, bring clean water. Cal, tear that sheet." When Jonas came running, breathless from the north field, she was already at work. Blood streaked her apron, her needle flashing quick and sure. "How bad?" he asked. "He'll mend. I've seen worse." He watched her hands move, steady as sunrise, fearless as any man on the range, and something inside him shifted. When the boy finally stirred, dazed and grinning weakly, Evelyn brushed his hair from his forehead. "Rest easy, son. The horse won't bother you again." That night, the men told the story by lamplight, each version wilder than the last, until she was practically wrestling wild stallions barehanded. Evelyn only shook her head, smiling softly. Jonas sat at the far end of the table, silent but watching, that unreadable look back in his eyes. Later, when the laughter faded and the house quieted, he found her wiping down the counter. "You've changed this place," he said. She looked up, surprised. "How so?" The men laugh again. "The kitchen smells like home. I eat and remember what hope tastes like." Her voice dropped. "That's all I came to bring. Hope." "Maybe it's more than that," he murmured. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them was charged, fragile, alive. Then he tipped his hat. "Good night, Mrs. Marlowe." She answered softly, "Good night, Mr. Barrett." But the quiet that followed carried more warmth than any words could hold. The wind had changed. It carried dust from the south and trouble from town. Evelyn could feel it before she heard a word. By the end of the week, every man at the Double B was on edge. Stray cattle, trampled fences, and riders seen where they shouldn't be. All signs pointed toward Clayton Morrison stirring mischief again. Jonas kept his temper bottled, but the muscle in his jaw told another story. "Hold the line," he told Cal one morning. "No fights, no foolishness. Morrison wants me to strike first." He rode out that evening to check the south boundary and returned hours later, silent and grim. Evelyn didn't ask. Some battles didn't need words. The next day she learned just how far Morrison's poison had spread. She'd gone to town with Cal for supplies, riding the buckboard through heat that shimmered like a mirage. As they rolled past the saloon, conversation stopped. Heads turned. Whispered words followed them like flies around a carcass. Inside Coleman's store, the air felt heavy with judgment. Mrs. Whitfield stood near the fabric counter, lips pursed tight enough to crack. "There she is," she said loudly, "the widow who's bewitched Mr. Barrett. Shameful, truly shameful." Her companion tittered. "Dancing with him under the stars, I heard. No wonder Morrison's losing patience." Evelyn's hands trembled only once, when she reached for flour. Then she steadied herself. "Gossip is the only crop that grows fast in this town," she said coolly. "Careful you don't choke on it." As she turned toward the counter, a man stepped in her path. Fine hat, polished boots, a smile like a knife. Clayton Morrison himself. "Mrs. Marlowe," he drawled. "What a pleasure. You've been quite the talk of Copper Creek." "I'm sure I have better things to do than listen," she replied. He moved to block her again. Now. No need for frost. I'm a man of opportunity. I could offer you better pay, a comfortable house, civilized company. The Barrett Ranch is no place for a lady." "The Barrett Ranch," she said evenly, "is honest ground, which is more than I can say for your offers." Something cold flickered behind his smile. "Careful, Mrs. Marlowe. Respectable women shouldn't bite the hand that might one day feed them." A shadow fell across them both. "Then it's lucky she doesn't need your hand," came Red Hawkins' voice from the doorway. The cowboy's easy grin was gone. His palm rested near his gun. Morrison's eyes narrowed. "You interfere at your own risk, Hawkins." "Risk's my breakfast, mister," Red said mildly. "Now the lady's leaving." Evelyn met Morrison's gaze one last time. "Tell your men to stay off Barrett land," she said softly. "Next time, the sheriff will hear from me." Morrison stepped aside, still smiling that snake smile. "Enjoy your stay, Mrs. Marlowe. I hear it won't last." Back at the ranch, Jonas listened without interrupting as she recounted the scene. When she finished, he was very still. "He touched you?" "No," she said, "but he wanted to. He wanted me afraid." Jonas nodded once. That was his mistake. From that day, the ranch lived under quiet siege. Dead coyotes were found at the fence lines, warnings from men too cowardly to face him outright. Evelyn's laundry line was cut. Windows rattled at night from hoofbeats that came and went too fast to trace. The men stayed armed. Jonas slept less and spoke little. Then came the handbill. Eli brought it in from the gate one morning, his young face pale. Evelyn read the bold letters slowly. "Citizens of Copper Creek call upon Jonas Barrett to dismiss the immoral woman residing at his ranch. Her presence invites scandal and unrest." Her stomach turned to ice. When Jonas found her sitting on the porch, the paper still in her hands, he didn't ask what was wrong. He'd already heard. "Morrison's stirring them up," he said. "He'll use the town to do what his guns couldn't." Evelyn folded the handbill carefully. As if it were a letter she refused to answer. "What will you do?" "I'll get you safe passage out of here," he said. "Denver, maybe farther west. You'll have money, references." "No." His head snapped up. "Evelyn." "No," she said again, stronger. "I won't run because of lies. I won't hide while he poisons this valley." He raked a hand through his hair, anger and worry mixing. "You don't understand. They'll destroy your name." "My name already died with my husband," she said quietly. "I have nothing left to lose except my dignity, and I intend to keep that." Something inside him broke. "You're a torment," he burst out. "Every day I see you, I want what I shouldn't want. When you smile, I forget the ranch, the debt, everything. And that terrifies me more than Morrison ever could." The confession hung in the hot, still air. Evelyn's breath caught. "And you think I don't feel the same?" He stared at her, chest rising and falling. "Morrison will use you against me." "Then we don't let him," she said. "I'll face the town myself. I'm done being a ghost in other people's stories." He reached for her hand, then stopped, shaking his head in wonder. "You impossible woman," he murmured. "Maybe," she said softly, "but you wouldn't trade me for an easier one." For a moment, neither moved. Then thunder rumbled far off, rolling across the plains. "Storm coming," Jonas said, glancing west. Evelyn followed his gaze. The sky was black as iron. "Let it come," she whispered. "We'll weather it." That night the storm hit, fierce and sudden, tearing shingles from the barn and flooding the yard. Rain hammered the windows like fists. Jonas stood in the kitchen doorway, soaked to the bone. "Roads will be mud by morning," he said. "Maybe they'll postpone that meeting," Morrison called. Evelyn handed him a mug of coffee, their fingers brushing. "And maybe they won't." Lightning flashed, lighting the lines of exhaustion on his face. "You could still leave," he said quietly. "I already did," she answered. "When I left Kansas. This is where I stay." Outside, the wind howled like a living thing, but inside the lamplit kitchen the world felt still. For the first time, Jonas reached for her hand and didn't let go. "Whatever comes," he said, "we face it together." "Together," she promised. Morning broke cold and gray. The storm had passed, but its anger lingered in the clouds hanging low over the hills. Evelyn woke before dawn, the faint scent of wet wood smoke in the air. She brewed coffee, steadying herself for the day the town would decide her fate. By mid-morning, riders were already gathering near the old meeting hall in Copper Creek. Wagons lined the muddy street, faces she'd once smiled at now turned away. A few men tipped their hats out of habit, shame flickering in their eyes. Jonas rode beside her, his jaw tight, hat pulled low. "You don't have to do this," he murmured. "I do," she said softly. "If I hide, he wins." The hall smelled of dust, damp coats, and nervous talk. Morrison stood near the front, gleaming in a dark coat and false charm. "We must think of the town's reputation," he told the crowd. "A woman of questionable virtue living among hired men. It invites ruin." Evelyn stepped forward, voice clear and calm. "You speak of virtue, Mr. Morrison, as if you'd ever met it. I came here to work, not to shame anyone. Every meal I cooked was honest. Every word I spoke true." The crowd shifted. Someone in back muttered, "She ain't wrong." Morrison's smile thinned. "So you deny impropriety with Mr. Barrett?" Her chin lifted. "I deny your right to ask." A ripple of uneasy laughter spread through the room. Jonas took one step forward, his voice hard as steel. "That's enough. Any man here who doubts her character can answer to me directly." Silence. Even Morrison hesitated. "She's earned her place," Jonas continued. "When my men were hungry, she fed them. When one of ours was near death, she saved him. I'll stand with her against any liar who says otherwise." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then old Sheriff Dobbs rose from his seat near the door. "Seems to me this ain't about virtue or work," he said slowly. "It's about a man who can't stand losing what he wants. Mrs. Marlowe's done this town proud. That's my say." The murmur grew until even Morrison could feel the shift. His face darkened. "You'll regret crossing me, Barrett," he hissed. Jonas's eyes didn't waver. "Not half as much as you'll regret touching her name again." Outside, the wind picked up, scattering the handbills Morrison's men had plastered across the walls. They fluttered through the street like broken promises. The crowd began to drift away, the verdict silent, but clear. Evelyn stood on the steps, breath shaking from the weight that had lifted. Jonas joined her, his voice low. "You just faced down half the territory." She smiled faintly. "I was more afraid of burning the biscuits this morning." He laughed then, a sound she hadn't heard from him in months. "You're remarkable." "Only stubborn," she said. "Same thing," he answered. For a moment, peace seemed possible. But peace never stayed long on the frontier. That night, fire tore through the barn. Flames roared high, feeding on hay and wind. Men shouted, horses screamed. Smoke turned the world to chaos. Evelyn ran from the kitchen barefoot, skirt flying. Jonas was already there, hauling buckets, shouting orders. "Morrison's men!" Cal yelled. They said it and ran. "Get the horses out!" Jonas barked. Evelyn joined the chain, passing buckets until her arms ached. Sparks burned her sleeves, smoke clawed her throat. A beam cracked overhead and came crashing down. Jonas lunged, pulling her clear as the roof caved in. They hit the ground hard, his body shielding hers from falling ash. The heat scorched their skin. When it was finally over, the barn stood black and broken, smoke drifting like ghosts into the night. The herd was safe. Most of the damage was to lumber and tools, but Jonas's face was set in grim fury. "He wanted to break me," he said hoarsely. "He'll see I'm still standing." Evelyn touched his arm. "He's already lost, Jonas. Look around." The men stayed. The ranch still stands. His eyes met hers, the firelight reflecting both exhaustion and something deeper. "And you stayed." "I said I would," she whispered. He brushed a strand of singed hair from her face, thumb trembling slightly. "You could have died in there." "So could you. Doesn't make it easier." "No," she said softly. "It makes it worth it." The distance between them closed. Rain began to fall again, cooling the ashes, blurring the line between smoke and sky. He kissed her then, not in passion, but in gratitude, in surrender, in every word they hadn't dared to say aloud. When they finally broke apart, he breathed her name like a prayer. "Evelyn." She smiled through tears. "Now you're learning." They stood together under the rain until the last ember died, the night quiet except for the soft hiss of water on charred wood. Morning light found the ranch still steaming from the night's rain. The barn was gone, but the smell of wet ash and horses told Evelyn that not all had been lost. Jonas moved through the wreckage like a man half awake, sleeves rolled, eyes hollow but determined. Every board he lifted, every nail he drove back into place, spoke more than words ever could. The men worked in silence beside him, their faces set. Even young Eli, still limping from his fall weeks ago, refused to rest. Evelyn brought them food, water, and quiet encouragement, her voice cutting through exhaustion like a gentle wind. By sunset, the worst was cleared. The barn would be rebuilt. The ranch would live. That evening, she found Jonas sitting on the porch steps, staring toward the dark hills where Morrison's land lay hidden. A bruise shadowed his cheek, soot still marking his collar. She handed him a tin cup of coffee and sat beside him. "Any word from town?" she asked. He shook his head. "Sheriff's hunting them, but even if they never hang for it, Morrison's finished. Folks saw enough to know what kind of man he is." They watched the last line of sunlight fade. The sky burned orange, then turned soft blue. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, she said, "When I came here, I thought I was just looking for work. I didn't expect to find peace." He looked at her, eyes tired but clear. "I didn't expect to find anything at all. Yet here we are," she said with a small smile. He took her hand then, rough and warm. "I can rebuild the barn, the fences, the herd. But the one thing I can't build alone is a life worth waking up to. Stay here with me." Her breath caught, soft and sharp as a heartbeat. "You're asking me to be more than your cook, Jonas Barrett. I'm asking you to be my home." The words landed gentle and true. Evelyn turned toward the open land stretching forever west. The grass whispered under the evening breeze. A hawk cried somewhere above. All her wandering, all her grief, all her fear, it had led here. "Yes," she said finally, "I'll stay." He smiled, slow and certain, the kind that reached his eyes. The porch boards creaked as he stood, pulling her close, the smell of smoke and rain still clinging to both of them. For once, the world was quiet. Weeks passed, and life returned to rhythm. The new barn rose stronger than the old. Neighbors came to help, bringing lumber, nails, and goodwill. Even Mrs. Whitfield, red-faced with guilt, brought pie and muttered apologies. Evelyn accepted them all with grace. On a clear September morning, the church bell rang over Copper Creek. The whole town turned out to see the widow in white and the rancher who had fought the world for her. Jonas's suit was plain, his tie crooked. Evelyn's dress was simple linen, trimmed with lace she'd sewn herself. When the preacher asked if he took her hand, Jonas answered before the question finished. "I already did." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Afterward, they rode back to the ranch. the wagon wheels creaking, ribbons fluttering from the rails. The men cheered, hats in the air. Cal wiped at his eyes and claimed it was dust. That night, beneath a sky heavy with stars, Jonas and Evelyn stood by the rebuilt barn, the scent of fresh-cut timber mixed with lilac from her window. He slipped an arm around her shoulders. "You sure you're ready for another season of bad coffee and early mornings?" he teased. She laughed, leaning into him. "Long as you don't burn the biscuits." He looked at her for a long moment, then whispered, "You saved more than my ranch, Evelyn Barrett. You saved me." She touched his cheek. "We saved each other." The wind moved through the grass, soft and endless, carrying the faint smell of rain over the plains. The Double B stood whole again, lanterns glowing warm in every window. Somewhere in the bunkhouse, Eli's harmonica began to play a slow, sweet tune. And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt exactly where they belonged. If you felt this tale in your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wild West Emotional Tales, where every story rides through the dust, the danger, and the kind of love that never dies. See you in the next tale, partner.